What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of Snowpiercer Season 3, Episode 4, Bound by One Track. This episode is directed by Leslie Hope. Now, before we begin, if you like this channel, awesome. Hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. As always, hit the notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like any of these videos, awesome. Hit that like button, as well as commenting below on any video that you watch, including this one. And so this episode is an episode I would call Visions and Past-centric, where basically every single character outside of LJ has some kind of vision of the past and how it affects them in the future or the current state of that they're in. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I was actually looking forward to learning a little bit about Asha's past, a little bit about, other characters' past, how everything affects one thing after another. This also gives us some revelations on Wilford and his kind of how he acted back in the day. And overall, I just kind of really like this episode. I'm going to be fairly honest. I think this was probably one of the better episodes. Is it as good as last week's episode? It gets close, but I don't think it gets to the point where it's like one of the greatest episodes of the season. But the episode is, once again, it's broken up into different sections where we have different people and the kind of arching narrative about how they're going to get to New Eden at some point. But in essence, it really focuses mostly, for the most part, on Alex's character, so I'll leave her to last. But basically, what's happening in this episode is Asha is trying to tell the lie that she has been, she's willing to do, where she is talking to kind of all the classes, all the, heads of each train compartment, with Layton staying there, right by her side. And it's really interesting to see her kind of struggle to find that narrative. They keep asking her questions, but then Pike comes into the mix and starts asking some really not great questions, really not nice questions. And you could tell he's very angry. And it's a very interesting kind of turn for his character. I don't know if it's because of all the stress that he was put under after Layton and the crew left with Snowpiercer at the end of the season 2. But he starts asking questions that are really kind of forceful in their nature, and you can tell there's some kind of sinister nature behind it. But when Layton kind of lets everybody go, he approaches Pike and offers him whatever job he wants he can have. But the way Pike is acting is one of guilt tripping Layton, kind of angrily at Layton. They kind of get into a very tense standoff in a lot of aspects where they're kind of eyeballing each other, which I thought was kind of interesting. But Pike basically makes it known that he's not happy that Layton left him, that Layton was gone for as long as he was. And it just feels like there's going to be something that comes to a head later on. But there's something really interesting with Pike's character that makes him a little more dimensional. And that's with Ruth. Like I said, Pike leaves, and of course Layton goes off, and I'll talk about Layton in a second. But as we've seen through the first 3 episodes of the series, Pike and Ruth have developed a relationship. They developed a close bond with one another because they're kind of the heads of this revolution on Big Alice, as it was in the middle of the 6 months that was taking place between the 2 cars. And what's really interesting is he's an individual that is really protective of whatever he is protective of. This point in his character arc, he's protective of Ruth. Ruth goes and gets her old uniform back, which is cool. You see the smile on Ruth's face. And Ruth, like I said, is one of my favorite characters now because she has so much dimension to her character. But in essence, Ruth and Pike, Ruth goes back to her car, and Pike's sitting there, and he pulls out what is one of those sweet gestures, one of those things that he's always promised, that if Layton were to ever come back, if everything were to kind of cool down, I guess you could say, they would celebrate with a thing. I think it's called Banana Foster. It's what Ruth calls it. I may have misheard what she said, but it basically is ice cream with banana, I guess is what it comes down to. And he has a banana in the box, and they go and celebrate in his in the back car, one of the backer cars of the train. And it leads basically to Ruth going to Pike's, where he lives. And you see this coming from a mile away. You know what's going to happen, but when you just notice that the relationship's gone farther than just being friends and being cohorts and stuff like that, to being more of a romantic relationship, they take it to the next step, and they take it to fourth base or whatever you want to call it. And that's a really interesting dynamic. This relationship actually weirdly reminded me of the series Lost, one of my favorite shows of all time, which Sawyer and Juliet became a couple after everything went down, after people left the island. So I don't know if the writers have something to do with that, if they're kind of doing an homage or something like that, but it really felt like these 2 characters their relationship started because of a situation, and I really like where they finally have two characters that have different dynamics, but they're coming together. But it gives Pike something to do, because I feel like his character would kind of fall off the cliff if he didn't have Ruth. And Ruth's a great character to begin with, so it kind of works on its own. But I really was like, oh, this feels like the Sawyer-Juliet relationship, where they're two completely different characters, or completely different individuals with completely different personalities, and here they are together. I thought that was kind of a cool thing, and they are going to have a relationship. I think that's how it's going to go. So, and then we kind of move on to what is the Vision and past centric arcs, which I was talking about earlier, and I'll talk about Layton stuff real quick, or not real quick. I'll talk about Layton stuff. Layton is, of course, trying to keep the train in check. They're trying to get into New Eden. They, of course, they're in the kind of engineer's car, and they find something blocking their path, which is a couple trains, which I'll talk about more in the Aleks section, but it is trains from Big Alice that have been disconnected, as Aleks says, so they're going to try and fix it because the clamps are down on the train, so they can't move it out of the way to move forward. So they decide they're going to move back, and Layton basically is dealing with a couple of situations. He's dealing with trying to keep Asha, from completely falling apart. There's a point where they're in the food car, and in essence, what's happening is she's having visions, of course, of what happened to her in the past. I talked about it a couple episodes ago, where it'd be nice to see kind of what happened to her, a little bit about, why she became who she is. She's always down on herself. Like I said, she's a wild card. And then we see a little bit of that Vision stuff, where we see the Marauders kind of taking down her crew. And it's really kind of scary to watch, something I wanted to see, but you realize it's a very dangerous situation that she was in. But it also puts in the fact that she goes into the nightclub car, which is very S&M in feel, and she has a drink on the house from LJ, and she starts freaking out, and Bess has to come help her. And like I said, you're going to see a character in this character of Asha really kind of go one side or the other, where her lie looks like it's going to fall apart, or she's going to find a way to get through this whole situation. But I like her dynamic in this episode. It's not a lot to do, but she's a character that's going to play a big part later on when the storyline comes down to a head, I think at the end of the season, when maybe they get to New Eden and it's not exactly what they're hoping for. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to her character. And so this leads Andre Layton to go to, of course, Tyson, who's been a mainstay character, but not a prominent character in the series. She's the doctor that we saw from the very beginning of the series. And they have a chat about the baby, about what's going on. Tyson's like, I wasn't one taking care of the baby. They kind of pushed me aside. It was one of those doctors that you saw through the entire second season that was working on Icy Bob, I guess you could say. And they basically find out through charts that what they were doing to Zara's baby was a prenatal situation, where they were injecting this baby with ice, whatever it is, ice things. And it's the same thing that they did to Josie, to help Josie protect her from the snow and the ice and so on and so forth. But then this leads to Layton talking to the doctor, the ones that were working on Icy Bob. And he, of course, finds out that it was a prenatal gene enhancement. And the doctor's like, we were working on a way for the protecting of the cold. It's basically they're trying to help these individuals kind of, if they have babies, kind of work through the cold, maybe survive, I guess, later on. It makes a lot of sense, but it is not well put out to the people. So it's kind of an experiment that, it is what it is. But this doctor says it was Zara's approval. She consented to it, because Layton's like, I'm not here. You can't consent to this type of thing. And then Zara and, of course, Andre Layton have argument. It's one of those things where it's about the logic of consent. It's about is it right to do things without the other half of your spouse and stuff like that. And it really boils down to just kind of, what is the ultimate kind of ultimatum to what Wilford was doing. Apparently it was to help the baby, survive whatever this cold, this freeze over, whatever is happening, and maybe find a better tomorrow, I guess you could say. So there is some interesting dynamics to Wilford and what they were doing and how they were trying to survive. Yes, he was using it for kind of a undestructible force, I guess you could say, with Icy Bob, but we see that is much, much more complex than it really was in the long run. So, and then there's, of course, Bess and Sam. Sam, of course, has been in that box for 6+ months, and when he recovers, he's basically a drunk. He's drinking himself to death. Bess has to take him from the nightclub car, and he wants to see where his wife's official end came, and that's the person we see in the other box. And in essence, he's told it says he wants to be left alone. He ends up stealing a pouch of some kind of drug. I'm not entirely sure what it is. He also steals a needle. He uses it, I'm sure, to keep himself, high and kind of unfeeling, I guess you could say. And then he goes at some point later on in the episode to relieve the guy who's watching over, of course, Wilford. And Wilford, throughout the entire episode, has been basically keeping track of where the location and where they're at, what exactly the specific place they're in, so he can kind of, keep an eye on what's going on. And of course, Melanie is part of that vision. Now, Melanie is a character that hasn't come back since last season, so the stuff in the trailer might be the visions that we're seeing of Melanie. Wilford's talking to Melanie, it's coming from his brain. So the stuff we're seeing might be just that. It might just be Wilford talking to Melanie, and this is all Melanie is throughout the entire season. But Melanie is, they're having conversations back and forth. He's keeping track. He realizes the Snowpiercer has stopped. It's back and forth. He realizes what's going on. He feels an inkling of guilt and stuff like that, which is really interesting for a character like Wilford, who never felt guilt, who never felt like any kind of emotion that was a good thing or a bad thing. And it's really interesting to see what happens when he realizes what's going on with Alex and Bennett and so on and so forth. But it basically leads to him getting stabbed by Sam, because Sam relieves the guy who's watching over him. He walks down to Wilford's car. Wilford thinks Sam is relieving him, to bring him out of the cage. He's like putting up his tie. Sam stabs him, and of course he starts going down for the count, bleeding out his mouth, down his chest or whatever. Andre Layton comes down real quickly because he wants to talk to Wilford. He still realizes what Sam's done. Bess takes Sam away, and we find out that, of course, Wilford's going to survive because he's in critical condition, and Alex is like, oh, good, he's still alive, because she's really mad at him. But I think that's really interesting. I knew that Wilford wasn't going to die in this episode because it's the 4th episode. That's kind of a penultimate episode type of thing if you're actually going to kill Wilford or Andre Layton or anybody like that. But that's pretty much where all that kind of the smaller portions of this episode lie, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this episode. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving chessboard pieces. The biggest story, the thing that's most prominent in this episode, is how are they going to move those 3 or 4 cars that are just kind of in the middle of the track? What do they do? And we find out by Alex that these are cars that were left behind because, for whatever reason, it's not fully explained till later on. So Bennett and, of course, Alex are going to go to these cars. And Alex is also seeing visions of Melanie, who also is in her head, it's her subconscious, her consciousness talking to her in a lot of ways. And it's really nice to see Jennifer Connelly come back. I really wish she would come back in this series, but maybe she is dead. I don't know. I haven't seen the 5th episode. I haven't seen the 6th episode. But I thought that was kind of fun, interesting, and unique. I thought, the idea of that Wilford's having the same kind of Melanie visions that Alex is having is like almost like a connection between the two, like kind of like Last Jedi, Star Wars and stuff like that. But Bennett and Alex go to the train to basically, Alex takes the detonators and batteries and stuff like that, and they go to the train to basically destroy the clamps so they can move the train. Well, the thing about this train is, the reasoning behind what Wilford is doing, I thought was really fascinating, because he disconnected because there was problems with these cars. They were always breaking down. The worst part about it is the revelation of what were in these cars. And as Bennett's doing what he's doing, trying to figure out where the best places to remove the locks and stuff like that, in essence, the cars are holding dead bodies. Not only are they holding dead bodies, but it's the lower class people, and there are children in this car. And on top of that, we reveal that there was an individual named Shiloh who was a good friend of Alex. And Alex is having trouble. She has a breakdown about the situation because Shiloh is a good friend. What Wilford did really destroyed her. And you find out that Wilford did it not out of spite, but it was the only thing that he had to do it. And it just really kind of sucks when you think about it, because it was a choice that Wilford made, and you think Wilford's like an all over bad guy. That's what it seems like for the first 2, season 2, and then a few episodes in season 3. But it's really about the struggles of how do we survive, what do we do, and how do we kind of keep everything in check. And it was really heartbreaking to watch Alex see, vision back to the time when there were people on the train, when she was younger, when she was hanging out with Sheila, who might be more than just a friend. It's just depending on how they go with the story. It's a really kind of sad, really depressing thing. And it made me feel like that they're trying to pull on the heartstrings, which was what they're trying to do. But I don't know if they were totally successful, because there have been other things in this series that have been a little more effective when it comes to pulling on the heartstrings. Even the Melanie stuff, the Melanie and of course Aleks stuff, when Melanie kind of is assumed to be dead, that's more devastating to me than what happens here, because you don't follow these characters on this train at all except for this episode. So it's sad. It feels like Titanic a little bit in the beginning, when you see the people and you don't really have any connection to them. It's not till later on that you really do. You really get a really good sense of who these individuals are. And here, you hear about Shiloh, you hear about what happens to her, but there's no real connection. So maybe this will kind of play out later on. Maybe there'll be some more dynamic, but it's still heartbreaking. It's still sad. I'm not taking away from what the effectiveness of the thing is doing. But Alex has a mental breakdown for a second. Melanie's character is able to pull her up. She's able to kind of, because of what Wilford taught her about being an engineer, she's able to kind of find, because they've already destroyed some of the clamps, and some of the clamps are not able to destroy. She's able to find the place to dislodge the clamps from where they're at. And I just think this whole segment with Alex really adds a lot of dimension to who Alex's character is. She's lost a lot of people that she loves, that she cares about. And it really is heartbreaking to watch her have to go through this. But once they get the cars pushed out of the way, they can continue their journey. But that's pretty much where the episode ends. Like I said, Wilford's in critical condition. Alex is like, oh, goody, blah, blah, blah. Ruth and Pike and all them. Everybody's in their kind of next phase of this series, which we're 6 episodes away from the end of the season. And I think this is a really good episode. I really do. I think we're given a lot of back history, a lot of, these characters past. There's some revelations. There's some, Melanie and kind of the psyche of how she affected with Wilford and Aleks. There's just a lot of good stuff working here. And I really felt that this episode as a whole really kind of helps the season prove once again that maybe the second season, like most shows, is just where they find their footing and have to kind of develop the whole situation. And here, they can just kind of ride the rails. They can ride the track. They can just continue forward, get their story in motion, get the story forward, and continue down a journey that will make this series somewhat special. And like I said, I love the first season. I'm mediocre on the second season, but this third season, even after 4 episodes, might actually be better than the first season, to be fairly honest. The first season is great, but this season so far is just, there's so much kinetic energy and so much heartbreak and so much just passion put into it. It just feels like a much different series than it wasn't from the very beginning. So overall, like I said, I would give this probably, we'll just say a 9. I'll probably just connect it with this last episode. And just, I think this is a great episode. I really do. I think it gives us a lot, and I can't wait to see what happens in episode 5. I can't wait to see what exactly is going to happen between all the characters. Where they're going to, like I said, the chess pieces are just kind of slowly moving into place, and we'll see how it plays out in the third season as the episodes move along. So 9 out of 10. I think this is a really good episode. So anyways, that'll do it. That'll be my take on Snowpiercer Season 3, Episode 4, Bound by One Track. Thank you so much for watching. Comments below, what do you think of the overall episode? Give me your overall thoughts on what you think it's going next. Do you think it's, do you agree with me on where you think it'll place on the chessboard, all the good stuff? Otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.